Thank you. The Committee on Natural Resources will come to order. The committee is meeting today to hear testimony on the transformation of Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, PREPA. Under the committee rule 4F, any oral opening statements at the hearing are limited to the chair and the ranking minority member or designee. This will allow us to hear from the witnesses sooner and help members keep to their schedules. Therefore, I ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the clerk by 5 p.m. today or the close of this hearing, whichever would come first. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Without objection, the chair may also declare a recess subject to the call of the chair. As described in the notice, statements, documents, or motions will be submitted to the electronic repository at hnrcdocs@mail.house.gov. Additionally, please note that as with our fully in-person meeting, members are responsible for their own microphones. As with our fully in-person meetings, members can be muted by the staff only to avoid inadvertent background noise. Anyone present in the hearing today must wear a mask covering their mouth and nose. The Speaker of the House and the Sergeant of Arms, acting upon the recommendations of the attendant physician, require face coverings for all indoor gatherings over 15 minutes in length, such as committee meetings. Accordingly, to maintain decorum and protect the safety of members and the staff, the chair will not recognize any member in this hearing room to speak who is not wearing a mask. According to House Rule 17 and Committee Rule 3D, the chair retains the right of recognition of any member who wishes to speak or offer a motion. This right includes the responsibility to maintain decorum. Please note that it is permitted by the Sergeant at Arms guidance. The chair will make exceptions for members briefly removing the mask to facilitate lip reading by viewers who are deaf or hard of hearing. Finally, members or witnesses experience technical problems should inform the committee staff immediately. With that, now I will recognize myself for the opening statement. In May 2019, when this committee held a hearing, the status of the rebuilding and privatization of PREPA, I stated that my primary concerns were determining the best way to guarantee that PREPA would be rebuilt so that it can withstand future extreme weather conditions, provide the residents of Puerto Rico with reliable, inexpensive, and clean power, and prevent the displacement of PREPA's workers. Nearly 3 years after the onset of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, and billions spent by FEMA and the Army Corps to turn the lights back on, Puerto Rico's electric grid unfortunately remains fragile and vulnerable, in part due to recent earthquakes that have further impacted PREPA's infrastructure. We will hear today from a diverse group of witnesses who will speak to the issues currently confronting PREPA, as well as if and when PREPA will be able to deliver reliable, inexpensive, and clean power to the people of the island. We can all agree that reform of PREPA is necessary to provide clean, low-cost electricity, but it is the course that PREPA has embarked on. But is the course that PREPA has embarked on the correct one to accomplish these goals? Remains a question. Last year, the government of Puerto Rico adopted a mandate of achieving 100% renewable energy by 2050. Currently, less than 3% of Puerto Rico's energy production comes from renewables. The fact is, however, that PREPA's current contracts with companies who are tied to U.S. natural gas industry and designed only to retool existing infrastructure can only lead one to the conclusion that adding sufficient renewables to the grid will be difficult to achieve, to say the least. Lastly, in the weeks leading up to today's hearing, headlines about PREPA, such as the privatization of Puerto Rico's power grid, is mired in controversy, and Puerto Rico's troubled utility is a gold mine for U.S. contractors, suggests much still needs to be done to accomplish the goals that were outlined. Today's hearing will also discuss PREPA's recently announced privatization and long-term concession of its power generation and distribution assets. Questions have been raised about the lack of transparency in finalizing the concession contract with Luma Energy, and PREPA's employee union, WITIR, recently sued the utility and the government of Puerto Rico, alleging that Luma contract violated local laws. In closing, let me welcome our witnesses and thank them for joining us for this important hearing. The residents of Puerto Rico deserve an electric company that is reliable and efficiently run, does not charge excessive rate, and is operated with a mind towards a future that generates electricity using clean and sustainable renewable energy. It is our intention to do all we can to assist PREPA in achieving these goals. The efficiency, public openness, and reliability are essential to the economic recovery and growth of the island as well. With that, I now yield to the ranking member designee for her opening statements. Hold on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the last few years, Puerto Rico has been hit with a series that expose the precarious and state of our energy infrastructure. In 2017, Hurricane Maria completely destroyed the power grid, and it took almost a year to restore service to every citizen. Early this year, a series of earthquakes in the southwestern region of the island severely damaged and took out Costa Sur power plant, which used to generate approximately 25% of the island electricity and still offline. The transformation of Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, or PREPA as we know it, is long overdue. We need a modern, resilient energy system that can recover quickly from natural disasters. We need to pursue policies to address high electricity costs that hinder economic growth, including efforts to reduce our dependence on foreign oil imports and to lower environmental impact. And we need to improve management practices to increase reliability and provide better services to our customers. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses about the steps PREPA and the government of Puerto Rico has pursued to achieve these and other necessary changes. I know that recently a contract was awarded to Luma Energy to manage and operate the utilities transmission and distribution system for the next 15 years. I have long argued that private partnership and investment are crucial to transform Puerto Rico's energy system if properly executed. So I expect to hear more about this agreement and their implications. Moreover, federal support has and will continue to be crucial for PREPA's transformation. As members of Congress, we must conduct oversight on how federal funds to rebuild and modernize the island electric system has been spent to this day. However, we must also ensure funding allocated in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria is no longer delayed by bureaucratic processes and finally reaches the island. This includes the $1.9 billion in CDBG funds provided under the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 to improve the electrical power system that are not yet there after 2 years. I want to hear from witnesses about the status of these and other federal funds, including recent efforts and conversations with HUD, FEMA, the Department of Energy, and other important stakeholders. I will also ask what recommendations will the panel make as how Congress can help facilitate the modernization of Puerto Rico's energy system. Lastly, and I must state that we are moving in the direction of a sustainable energy profile. But right now, we need to be able to provide reliable electricity to enable the recovery of Puerto Rico's economy. But we need to ensure reliable electricity until we get there. There is a long way to go, and we must be able to use all resources available. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, in fiscal year 2019, the sources of electricity in Puerto Rico were petroleum, 40%, LNG, 39%, coal, 18%, and renewables, 2.3%. Industry in Puerto Rico has the potential to contribute to our national supply chain for medical products and devices. We also need to ensure providing our people's residential needs by having a reliable system. And that requires a reliable supply, and we must not deny ourselves to examine alternatives. I look forward for the testimony and questioning of a witness, and with that, I yield I yield back to the chairman.
Thank you very much. And let me now turn to our panel and the witnesses that have come. And like I said earlier, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. It's an important subject, and given everything else that's going on and the difficulties of being able to get together to have these kinds of oversight hearings, I appreciate your presence and the presence of all my colleagues that are joining us today. Let me begin now with uh, each 5 minutes for your oral presentation. Anything that was submitted for the record is it, your written testimony is all made part of the record. And let me begin with Mr. Jose Ortiz, Executive Director, Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. Mr. Ortiz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Grijalva. PREPA has made a good deal of progress on several fronts, despite the devastation of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, the massive damage by multiple earthquakes, and the near shutdown of the Puerto Rico economy due to the COVID-19. The utility is better positioned and in compliance with the requirements of PROMESA, as evidenced by the recent certification of PREPA's 2020 fiscal plan by the Financial Oversight and Management Board of Puerto Rico. Some highlights of the substantial progress towards achievement of the operational initiatives and projects are included in the certified plan, and those are as following. One, the selection of an independent T&D operator to assume responsibility for operating, maintaining, and improving PREPA's transmission and distribution system. That operator, Luma Energy, is a Puerto Rico company owned by two experienced utility sector companies, ATCO and Quanta Services, working with innovative emergency management for its federal funding expertise. Under a public-private partnership, Luma will work to implement the energy sector transformation required by the bipartisan supported laws. Luma also brings an experienced leadership team and a comprehensive plan for the operation, maintenance, and renewal of PREPA's modern grid system. The completion of the work of converting San Juan Power Station to a dual fuel capacity and a commissioning of the liquefied natural gas handling facility allows PREPA to achieve significant reductions in greenhouse gas and particulate emissions, providing important public health benefits. In addition, their increased availability enhances the security and reliability of electrical supply in the metropolitan region. The conversion project should save PREPA and its customers around $280 million during the 5-year term of the contract. Another point is the renegotiation of a power purchase and operating agreement with Ecoelectrica and of a long-term gas supply agreement with Naturgy, approved by the FOMB, the Energy Bureau, and granted by the Federal District Court presiding over PREPA's PROMESA Title III proceeding. Combined, both contracts are estimated to reduce PREPA's net cost by approximately $100 million annually through September 2032. Another point is the renegotiation of 23 purchase and operating agreements with 7 operational and 16 new renewable generating project developers, totaling 600 megawatts, achieving 30 to 40% lower contract pricing than under the original contract, and 10% contract pricing discount with the operational projects as well. Substantial progress in the repair of PREPA's Costa Sur generating facility after significant damages from January's earthquake have been achieved. The 820 megawatt generating facility unit 5 should be completed by early August 2020. The more heavily damaged unit 6 is expected to be operational before year end. Development and submission of a new integrated resource plan, which has undergone extensive technical, evidentiary, and community hearings, and is currently before the Energy Bureau for approval. This will enable PREPA to pursue the rapid uptake of renewable and energy storage systems while preserving options that will permit it to procure natural gas-fired generating resources as well. Still, federal support is needed. PREPA expects to reach an agreement with FEMA on a fixed cost estimate on all permanent repair and reconstruction work very soon. We prepared already a 2-year plan, which starts addressing various individual projects, including distributed energy resources, microgrids, and a robust system to critical assets such as hospitals, shelters, and water services. The target is to make federal funding available to reconstruct a more modern and resilient energy grid. In conclusion, PREPA has made significant progress in rebuilding Puerto Rico electric system and restructuring PREPA itself. We have undertaken these efforts with real financial constraints during the transformation of Puerto Rico's energy sector, a truly complex challenge. The federal government support remains critical to our success, and we continue to look forward for ways to expedite the flow of federal funds. Efforts to achieve the resolution of PREPA's Title III restructuring under PROMESA were temporarily suspended earlier this year at FOMB's request, given the uncertainties on COVID-19 has created for PREPA and its customers. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this honorable committee and to provide this testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz, and let me now turn to Mr. Fermin Fonates, Executive Director, Puerto Rico Public-Private Partnership Authority. The time is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good Chairman Grijalva, Ranking Member Bishop, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the transformation of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. My name is Fermin Fontanes, and I am the Executive Director of the Public-Private Partnerships Authority. My testimony today will address the transformation of PREPA's transmission and distribution system. As Executive Director, I am leading the efforts related to PREPA's transformation and oversaw the procurement process that resulted in the agreement between Luma Energy and PREPA, pursuant to which Luma will operate, maintain, and modernize Puerto Rico's transmission and distribution system. This agreement marks the culmination of more than 18 months procurement process and represents a historic milestone in the government of Puerto Rico's objective of providing modern, affordable, resilient, and reliable power to the island. Luma is a Puerto Rico company formed by ATCO and Quanta Services, which will work with innovative emergency management to assist with the administration of federal funding. In recent years, PREPA has faced a number of significant challenges, including a lack of managerial continuity and long-term planning, a dated electrical system that is in poor condition, significant leverage that led to its inability to access credit markets, and a geographic mismatch between supply and demand. PREPA's challenges were aggravated by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. After the hurricanes, the government sought not only to rebuild the electric grid, but to transform it into a reliable, resilient, modern, and eco-friendly system. The most effective way to achieve these goals was to partner with a world-class private operator with the expertise, experience, and know-how to complete the much-needed transformation. The procurement process was designed to address a number of key considerations. The government was keenly focused on implementing a robust, competitive, and transparent procurement process to identify the private partner best positioned to accomplish the transaction's objectives. The process was also carried out in coordination with the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico. During the request for proposal process, the P3 Authority provided proponents with extensive access to information related to PREPA and the T&D system. Luma's proposal presents concrete and detailed plans and timelines for achieving substantial gains in safety, customer service, reliability, and resiliency. The contract also establishes clear obligations and performance metrics which Luma must comply with. Luma projects that it will be able to generate significant cost savings throughout the life of the contract. Between the reduction in O&M cost and the improvements in lost energy, Luma estimates a saving of $293 million per year in 2027. This results in significant annual and cumulative net savings for Puerto Rico and demonstrates that the contract will pay for itself, an estimate of $323 million in cumulative savings by 2027. Notwithstanding these savings, critics of the transaction have argued that the customer's rates will go up. That premise is incorrect. Luma is subject to the regulatory oversight of the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, and the contract specifically provides that all budgets prepared by Luma must comply with rates orders established by PREP. The contract does not require a rate increase or establishes a minimum rate for LUMA to operate. In addition, I want to make clear that no employee will lose their job as a result of this transaction. Their jobs are protected under existing law. Moreover, for those employees who end up working for LUMA, they will have access to world-class safety training and professional development opportunities, all of which have not been available to date for PREPA employees. PREPA's employees are essential for this transformation. Finally, with LUMA, we are bringing accountability to meet our goals of a renewable energy future. LUMA's commitment to complying with and achieving the renewable energy targets set forth in these plans is evidenced in its proposal. This is a first step towards achieving the government's renewable energy goals. The T&D transformation process that took place against a background of unique and unprecedented challenges. Notwithstanding these significant challenges, the P3 Authority was undeterred and forged ahead with its vision to transform PREPA. In partnership with LUMA, PREPA will finally deliver to the people of Puerto Rico what they deserve: a modern, affordable, resilient, and reliable electric energy system that will serve as a driver of economic recovery and growth. This partnership represents the most efficient and effective way to make this transformation a reality for Puerto Rico and its people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The next is the chair of the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, Mr. Edison Aviles. Sir?
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Grijalva, Ranking Member Designee Gonzalez Colon, and members of the committee. My name is Edison Aviles, and I am the chair of the Energy Bureau, also known as the PREP. On behalf of the PREP, I appreciate the opportunity afforded to present our views regarding the transformation of the Puerto Rico Power Authority, PREPA. PREP is an independent regulatory body consisting of a chair commissioner and 4 associate commissioners, all of whom have equal voting rights. The PREP has a mandate to implement and enforce the energy public policy of the government of Puerto Rico, as well as to adopt the regulation necessary for such implementation. The PREP was created in 2014 by the Puerto Rico Energy Transformation and Relief Act, serving as a key component for the full and transparent implementation of the Act's energy reform goals. The PREP has a mandate to ensure electric service is safe, reliable, and affordable. PREP's commissioners are highly qualified professionals. PREP also engage recognized experts in the regulatory field to assist its informed and grounded regulatory development, and is an active member of NATUC. The United States Department of Energy Office of Electricity has provided and continues to provide significant technical assistance in the areas of electric distribution planning and energy efficiency program development. The New York Department of Public Service is currently providing support to the PREP by sharing its expertise and experience with the oversight of the Long Island Power Authority, LIPA, third-party T&D Operation Services Agreement. The recently adjudicated T&D Maintenance and Operation Agreement provides the PREP with tools for enforcement. The private T&D operator has a financial incentive to improve system performance according to metrics approved by the PREP. On the other hand, penalties will be paid by LUMA, not the rate payers. Significant positive changes intended to rebuild public confidence have taken place since the last time the PREP testified in Congress. I am proud to report that the PREP is already conducting numerous proceedings that account for significant steps in advancing the transformational goals of reliability, sustainability, and cost effectiveness. Some notable proceedings include: number 1, first rate case. For the first time, electric service rates were set in Puerto Rico by an independent regulator. Number 2, regulation on energy cooperative in Puerto Rico. This regulation contributes to the public policy established by the government of Puerto Rico to promote the development of a decentralized energy model capable of providing renewable energy options to the residents of the island. Number 3, energy efficiency program development. The process to adopt an energy efficiency regulatory program started in 2019, and we expect to have the regulation in place before year end. This proceeding seeks to ensure an energy efficiency goal of 30% is reached by 2040. Number 4, regulation on electric energy wheeling. As a first step, PREPA adopted a regulation establishing the legal framework on electric energy wheeling. The second step, currently ongoing, encompasses the unbundling of PREPA assets to then adopt the applicable wheeling charges. PREP expects to complete this process within the next 8 months. The Integrated Resource Plan. The IRP is the cornerstone and roadmap of the energy transformation of the island. The PREP is currently evaluating the conformance of the utility proposed IRP with the goals set out in the Puerto Rico Energy Public Policy Act, and we expect the final resolution to be issued in August 2020. 6, preliminary T&D operation and maintenance agreement. It is important to emphasize that A, the Puerto Rico Energy Regulatory Framework, B, the certificate of compliance issued by the PREP, as well as C, the T&D agreement, acknowledge PREP's regulatory authority to ensure LUMA compliance with the energy public policy, the applicable legal framework, and the agreement itself. In our views, for all energy regulatory purposes, LUMA will be in PREPA's shoes. I look forward to your question and remain committed to build up the working relationship with the committee for the benefit of Puerto Rico.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Let me now invite for her comments, Ms. Ruth Santiago, member, Queremos Sol Coalition. Ms. Santiago, time is yours.
Good afternoon, Chairman Grijalva, members of the House Committee on Natural Resources, and to the public in general. On behalf of the Queremos Sol Coalition, we appreciate the opportunity to testify on the transformation of PREPA. The coalition is composed of civil society groups, including community, environmental, labor, professional organizations, and academia that have come together to promote the transformation of the Puerto Rico electric system. The coalition promotes the transformation of the Puerto Rico electric system as a public service, both relating to PREPA governance and the technology that empowers citizen participation. Recently, PREPA entered into a contract with LUMA Energy via a lengthy operation and management agreement for the transmission and distribution system, customer service, power generation, dispatch and control, planning, acquisitions, and many other functions. The contract's initial transition period requires numerous conditions prior to full takeover by LUMA. It signifies anything but a foregone conclusion that the transaction will be consummated. We urge this committee, the federal and Puerto Rican governments, to encourage PREPA to annul the LUMA contract and develop a plan focused on on-site solar and battery systems and energy efficiency programs based on the recommendations of numerous experts. The LUMA contract, in the midst of multiple crises, including the pandemic, seismic activity, socioeconomic dysfunction, and the threat of an active hurricane season, will not provide the 21st century electric system and service that the residents of Puerto Rico require. PREPA needs to transform its governance structure to integrate residents, employees, and businesses. The high poverty rates in Puerto Rico and the economic crisis require energy conservation, efficiency, demand response programs, and renewable energy technologies, primarily rooftop or on-site solar and battery energy systems, to substitute the fossil generation and the centralized transmission and distribution system. Queremos Sol opposes the use of billions of dollars in federal funds to rebuild and so-called harden the T&D system and add more fossil generation, especially methane gas, so-called natural gas infrastructure, that the LUMA contract would facilitate. Queremos Sol proposes the federal government work with PREPA to take measures to initiate a transparent transparent process for procurement of solar equipment and battery systems to be installed and maintained by the dozens of PREPA employees who have been trained in renewable energy already. The LUMA contract is a 20th century approach that will not prepare Puerto Rico for the climate crisis. It dismantles PREPA while simultaneously providing LUMA with multiple opportunities to abandon its responsibilities under the agreement. LUMA will prepare the PREPA IRP, may become part owner of the electric system, may request increases in electric rates. The contract requires alignment of the proposed T&D work with the grid modernization plan, which requested $21 billion from FEMA, of which $12.2 billion is for reconstruction of existing T&D systems rather than transformation of the system. And about $4 billion of that, additional $4 billion is for new fossil plants. The London Economics International report estimates that even with federal funding, the electricity rates would increase to 27.8 to 30 cents per kilowatt hour with the proposed T&D work and the RSA for the PREPA restructuring, the debt of the PREPA restructuring. LUMA is granted undue control to manage federal funds. It can participate in the selection of the grant administrator and request changes to federal funding. LUMA can abandon the tasks required under the contract after PREPA has been dismantled and when reinforcements of the electric system are most needed. The LUMA contract infringes upon the rights of PREPA employees as it will not be required to hire even the majority of PREPA employees. The contract provides for priority payments to LUMA to the detriment of other PREPA obligations. LUMA may suspend or terminate electric service to government entities that in turn provide public services. The LUMA contract would perpetuate centralized fossil fuel generation and T&D system. An example of this kind of old generation is the New Fortress Energy LNG terminal in San Juan. FERC recently issued an order to show cause against New Fortress because it built and operates the terminal without FERC's authorization. If New Fortress had requested FERC authorization, it would have been required to study the health and safety risks of the LNG terminal to nearby communities, workers, and properties prior to building and operating. The potential illegalities of the New Fortress project are exposed in an in-depth report published by Cambio and AIFA. The cost of electricity from San Juan 5 and 6 units already we've seen burning gas is 10.79 cents per million BTU, the most expensive baseload units in PREPA system. The Federal Oversight Management Board approved the New Fortress project and the new eco-electric agreements, which cost approximately $500 million more than competitively bid contracts did. The disastrous experience with the privatization of the energy and other sectors in Puerto Rico include the AES coal burning power plant, which has contaminated South Coast aquifer. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Ángel Figueroa Jaramillo, President, Electric Industry and Irrigation Workers Union. His statement will be read by the translator, and the translator will be available for the Q&A, so that and Mr. Jaramillo will be participating in those with the translator. With that, Señor Jaramillo, the floor is yours.
Sí, buenas tardes, mi nombre es Ángel Figueroa Jaramillo y comparezco como presidente de la Unión de Trabajadores de la Industria Eléctrica y Riego y agradezco al comité por la invitación. Me acompaña la licenciada Jessica Méndez Corber y el traductor Juan Segarra, que estará emitiendo para efecto de récord la postura de la UTIER.
Good afternoon. My name is Ángel Figueroa Jaramillo. I appear as president of the union of UTIER. I am with attorney Jessica Kohlberg, and I thank the committee for the invitation. My statement will be read by the translator, Juan Segarra. UTIER represents 3,000 of the 6,000 workers that PREPA will lay off due to the LUMA energy contract. However, UTIER speaks not only for the benefit of its members, but also for the 12,000 PREPA retirees and the people of Puerto Rico as a whole. It is essential that this committee know that we agree that PREPA needs to be transformed. However, handing over all current PREPA functions to a private operator is not a transformation. LUMA Energy will do everything PREPA is already doing and charging an additional $125 million in public funds for it. A true transformation requires investment and expert input. UTIER and other organizations have made proposals for a true transformation and have fallen on deaf ears. UTIER sponsors Queremos Sol, which is a comprehensive proposal to transform PREPA. We have also proposed changes such as altering the composition of the governing board and the Energy Bureau to increase transparency and consumer representation and limit the discretion that leads to contracting. 2, the implementation of an independent private sector inspector general, IPSIG, as a control to ensure compliance with existing laws and regulations without the need to appoint a trustee. And 3, most importantly, the reinvestment of funds in PREPA's workforce, which has been severely depleted in recent years and led to so many difficulties after Hurricane Maria. But apparently, what the government wants is to wash its hands of the deficiencies of those who have been appointed to manage PREPA and not transform it. As an example, the current CEO, Jose Ortiz, has done nothing for the real transformation. The contract with Luma does not provide any benefit for the people of Puerto Rico. The payment of the contract has already placed PREPA at a $125 million budgetary deficit, as certified by the Financial Oversight and Management Board in the latest budget. There is no doubt that PREPA does not have the resources to pay that money, which is why the Oversight Board is requesting an administrative expense priority in the Title III for Luma Energy, which in turn will affect the retirement system and other creditors. The only way to pay this deficit will be by increasing the rates, which will affect the people of Puerto Rico and disproportionately harm the population living below the poverty level, especially those with annual incomes between $0 and $14,399. This population will have to dedicate between 36 and 42% of their income to pay their electrical bill. Under the contract, Luma has even been given the deference that the plan of adjustment under Title III of PREPA must be, quote, reasonably acceptable to Luma Energy, end quote. Otherwise, Luma can terminate the contract. The concession on Luma to have veto power over the approval of the plan of adjustment will pressure the Oversight Board and the Title III Court to approve a plan that is not necessarily in the best interest of the people of Puerto Rico. The question to ask is, why should Luma have that kind of power? Luma will not be accountable to the people of Puerto Rico. It can terminate the contract practically at any time with only 120 days notice and leave Puerto Rico without an electric service operator. In addition, despite being a private entity, it will make public policy decisions and manage at its own discretion the $18 billion in federal funds assigned to Puerto Rico. In fact, Luma has already started bragging about those federal funds to its investors and affiliates. The federal government should stop this. Speaking about accountability, the locally registered corporation was created in January this year for the sole purpose of signing this contract and was created as a limited liability company to avoid responsibility. Furthermore, the contract has an exemption from express liability for any damage that Luma may cause to its ratepayers. In summary, Luma will take over PREPA's operations without investing a dime in PREPA or in Puerto Rico. It will charge a fee of $125 million and manage $18 billion in federal funds, and will be able to award contracts to Quanta Services and ATCO, while PREPA pays for its transition and operations. It is not accountable to the people of Puerto Rico, and it
Need
is
to wrap
not
that up pretty
equipped to
soon, sir.
transform the electrical process. In fact,
Thank you.
Luma, thank you.
You're welcome. The next person is Mr. Jose Rossi, President, Puerto Rico Institute for Competitiveness and Sustainable Economy. Sir, Mr. Rossi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Grijalva, Ranking Member Designee Gonzalez, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to examine the much needed transformation of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. We continue in economic crisis after hurricanes of historic proportion, recent damaging earthquakes, and now the pandemic. Amongst these challenges and still impeding Puerto Rico's rebound stands the broken electrical system. I'm before you today as chairman of the Institute, the ICSE. I'm past president of the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association and partner in a building services group of companies in the eastern U.S. Puerto Rico has an ongoing need for electrical system reorganization, investment plan, and contracting oversight that protects consumers and U.S. taxpayers' monies. It's a great concern that the latest PREPA fiscal plan by the Fiscal and Oversight Management Board, the Fiscal Board, ignores the fact that the restructuring support agreement, PREPA's RSA or debt reorganization structuring is unsustainable. There have been no attempts to update it in 2 years, and it has never been presented to the legislature and Energy Bureau. The fiscal plan does not include PREPA's most recent interim financial statement with capital deficit, nor has it met budget review and approval by the PREPA board, nor the regulator of the PREPA. Furthermore, PREPA's consumer representative, the only publicly elected member of the board and executive director, has challenged the government's ongoing suggestion of adequate PREPA board independence and professionalism. The PREPA board hastily approved the stalled and inaccurate RSA in 2019, despite a shallow fiduciary process that the consumer representative opposed with supporting evidence. More recently, PREPA's handling of Costa Sur's generation repairs following the January earthquakes has been suspect at best and raises questions about project execution skill and capacity to govern through operational crisis. There has been no accountability to the fact that Costa Sur's Unit 5 remains offline during peak season demand today. We know damage to this unit was minor and temporary fixes were available while longer-term solutions could be implemented. Yet PREPA put forward a questionable emergency summer generation plan to save the day, not executed today. PREPA needs independent professional and board governance with world-class supervision from the utility regulatory framework of the Puerto Rico Energy Policy Act, known as Act 17. Yet major decisions are still dominated by the same political appointees of ex-governor Ricardo Rosselló. The fiscal board is ill-equipped to address this lack of government commitment to best performance metric that should drive transformation in our government agencies. But the fiscal board can and must work closely with our utility regulator with adherence to Act 17 and PROMESA, with the consumer participation rights and obligations that Act 17 mandates. The fiscal board and the PREP have recently approved 2 utility scale investments with no tariff input proceedings, no Act 17 compliant adjudicatory processes, nor an approved infrastructure plan. One is a 10-year generation contract, the other a 15-year transmission and distribution management and operations agreement. 18 months after enactment of Act 17, the unapproved PREPA infrastructure plan still pushes fossil fuel infrastructure at the expense of large and small private renewable energy markets. Fragmented and non-transparent contract approval processes with no lawfully approved energy transformation roadmap yet will give way to lengthy regulatory or legal proceedings like the 2-year-old RSA. No government transparency portals and public relations spin can overcome this operational and legal dysfunction. I hope with your continued oversight and robust engagement of all to improve local utility regulatory capacity issues hindering real progress at PREPA and the sustainable electrical system reorganization, ICSE can be of service to the committee and the PREP so that PREPA, PROMESA, fiscal board effectively support Act 17 transformation framework to finally achieve energy justice for the more than 3.2 million American citizens living in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me, to begin the questioning, let me turn to the chairs of subcommittees to begin with, and by sequence, Mr. Lowenthal, if you have any comments or questions, let me recognize you. On the line.
Okay, I will come back and ask.
Okay. Mr. Gallegos?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have just one more, a couple of questions. And first question is for Edison. I want to make sure I see him up there. In terms of, for many years, we've been talking about trying to make the grid both energy independent and be able to use more renewable energies, but also at the same time being able to be resilient. And what are the steps that we even have to take before we start moving in that direction, in your opinion, in order for us to have both a resilient grid as well as one that is largely solely run on renewables?
Thanks for the question. We are right now in the evaluation of PREPA IRP. PREPA IRP submitted to the Bureau presents a new grid, a resilient one, that takes into consideration the impact of hurricanes Maria and Irma. What they propose, and I can defer to Jose Ortiz to better explain what they submitted, is that the island will be divided in 8 different mini-grids. And the grid will be interconnected and will be provided by generation within the grid and also with the centralized generation. We are right now evaluating what PREPA submitted, and we will have a final say in August. Again, I think that in order to better explain what they already submitted to the Bureau, I defer to Jose Ortiz to answer your question.
Yeah. And I unfortunately was not here, I think, when Ruth Santiago spoke at Queremos Sol Coalition. But I was hoping to get your opinion, Ruth, on the plan to basically solarize the Puerto Rican energy grid, as well as obviously to make it durable and resilient.
Okay, thank you for the question. So the government of Puerto Rico last year passed the Energy Public Policy Act, which has a renewable portfolio standard, as you know, that requires 40% renewables by 2025, 60% by 2040, and 100% by 2050. Unfortunately, what we've seen from the government has been totally in the other direction. So look at the new Fortress project in San Juan for conversion of those 2 big units to burn so-called natural methane gas. Look at the renegotiation of the Ecoelectrica contracts under disfavorable terms. And although there's talk of supposedly renegotiating some of the existing contracts, we have not seen any of that, and the conditions do not seem favorable to the people of Puerto Rico. And on the contrary, what we saw both in the IRP, the draft IRP, and during the hearings, is that customer-sited generation is the least cost alternative of all generation of all energy supply arrangements in Puerto Rico. And so even the economics, the technological viability is there. And that should be coupled with energy efficiency and conservation and demand response programs in order to take Puerto Rico really to the 21st century, using resources that are locally available. And as I mentioned, proven to be financially, both admittedly in the IRP, and technically viable.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank
I just
you.
want to get one more question in. Thank you. And the question for Mr. Ortiz. I hear a lot about, solarizing, renewable energies, and durability. There is a plan for large battery storage for this type of energy you're going to try to contain, because it doesn't work unless you actually have large battery storage, working with microgrids in order for you to basically be able to smooth out the peaks and the valleys of electricity.
You're absolutely right, Congressman Gallego. Certainly, we already with E3 Authority for Fontanes issued a request for proposal.
Okay, and I ran out of time, but what you're telling me is that you are issuing requests for proposals for battery storage to complement the microgrid. Okay, I yield back. Thank you.
Lord, for your comments, questions.
My first question would be to Mr.
For
Ortiz.
batteries, so
I don't know if it now, Mr. Ortiz, you said in your, you were talking in your statement about a different amount of federal funds, and we were discussing that prior to this hearing. How much federal funds PREPA just received, not just from FEMA, but all the federal entities to this day? And if you can provide later on the committee a detailed breakdown on how much PREPA received or expect to receive in the next 2 years from different federal agencies, FEMA, HUD, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Department of Energy for the rebuild and modernized Puerto Rico's energy infrastructure.
for the fixing of the system, we have over $2.5 billion already received and reimbursed in many cases for PREPA. We have we have completed basically the agreement on the estimates for the long run, the full modernization of the grid. That will be disclosed in the next few days probably. And about the next year and a half to 2 years, we have a program for $1.7 billion to be invested mostly on the critical loads, like the hospitals, water systems, shelters, and the, for example, medical center, the airport, and such critical facilities. So that's in a
Sorry, you're not including there the $1.9 billion from CDBGDR funds approved.
not yet. We're giving shape to it.
And what is happening that these funds are not yet being disbursed to the island?
That will be the CDBGDR are basically at the end of the line. It will be after we exhaust basically the 428 funding. We hope to start doing something with the 428 to redo of the grid in the third quarter of this year. I hope we're very close to that moment.
How explicitly the federal funds are going to help the modernization process of PREPA, and how the new contract will be working with federal funds?
Well, the new contract basically pulls an entity who has been 35 years dealing with federal funds. They will be taking care of the compliance and the procurement. The way to spend the federal funds are in alignment with the IRP, the PREP. It's considering at this point. But certainly, as Edison Avilés just mentioned, that will show a decentralized energy system consisting in about 40% of renewables by year 2025, being supported by a cleaner fuel fossil-driven equipment, like, for example, natural gas in San Juan and natural gas in the south, in Ecoeléctrica and Costa Sur. We will divide the island in 8 small islands or 8 mini grids, and those will basically be able to operate independently, and they will, assuming we have a hurricane strikes, You may lose one or two of those areas, but the rest of Puerto Rico will be able to continue working. A lot of undergrounding of power lines will be happening as well. Two of the biggest are the East Coast, what we call the grid, the Humacao system. That includes the municipalities of Humacao, Naguabo, Las Piedras, and Yabucoa. Normally, that's the door to all the events we have had in the last 100 years, basically. And also a very strong support and undergrounding of the important power lines to the industrial sector along PR 30 and along the Northeast. There you have the Medtronics, the Amgens, and all these big companies. And if we're overlooking at bringing those type of companies to Puerto Rico, we certainly have to provide a very reliable power.
One last question at this time. We are now in the hurricane season, so it's an obligated question to make if Puerto Rico's electric infrastructure is ready to face and withstand another hurricane or a storm in the next months. Are you ready?
Yes, yes. The answer is yes. We are in a very different condition. We have 5 times the inventory. We had, before Maria, we had $22 million in inventory. Today, we are $140 million in inventory. The strengthening of the transmission lines from south to north certainly are redone in 145 miles per hour winds. And certainly the project we have in San Juan 5 and 6 in San Juan provides a lot of reliability to the metropolitan area. One of the biggest issues was that 70% of the Puerto Rico demand is in the north, and we lost all the transmission from south to north. So having all that generation with natural gas, we will provide additional generation.
Let me now turn to, time's up. Time's up. Let me now turn to Mr. Stankos, you were here earlier, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ranking Member Bishop, and all of our witnesses for their expertise today. Like many, I'm hopeful that a compendium of tragedies that have befallen Puerto Rico, a recession to hurricanes to earthquakes and a pandemic, have a silver lining in that the island can emerge with a clean and resilient electric grid. We know now that we need clean power for urgent climate reasons. However, particularly in the case of Puerto Rico, clean power is also overwhelmingly the cheapest solution. The average cost of power on the island is currently an extremely burdensome 17 cents per kilowatt hour. That is twice the average cost of power generated from rooftop solar energy in Puerto Rico and nearly 9 times the average cost of wind power. I commend the goals of Law 17 that drive the island to renewable power. I'm now particularly interested in seeing how they will be practically implemented. Of course, the trick in implementing these renewable sources is always front-end cost. They tend to be somewhat expensive to build and then pay back over the long term. That is where the silver lining comes in. There is always already a need to spend substantial sums of money on new electricity construction. I think it is clear that in order for PREPA to live up to its mission of delivering reliable, low-cost electricity to Puerto Ricans, that money must go toward constructing renewables. So, Mr. Ortiz, Puerto Rico is expecting around $1.9 billion of community development block grant disaster relief funds for the electric grid reconstruction. Those funds represent a great opportunity to help low and moderate income families finance community-based energy projects such as rooftop solar. These funds are also an opportunity to promote community energy resiliency projects. Does PREPA currently have a plan for how those funds will be used, and is PREPA committed to use these funds for those much-needed purposes?
Absolutely, and I certainly agree with you. You know, the $1.9 billion will certainly supply what is needed for the poor and middle-income families need to have their own detached solar system. I certainly vouch for that. The solar system cannot be only for wealthy families in Puerto Rico. We have to be very careful. You know, when we talk about sun for everybody, it's not really that way. I think the $1.9 billion, I really would focus on the use of those for the 1,800 megawatts of solar power that will be needed by 2025. Certainly the best use we can make for those CDBGDR funding.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to turn to a different issue now regarding some of the challenges of ensuring that a public-private partnership serves the people in the way it's intended. I'm particularly worried about the implications of future natural disasters, which are projected to become both more common and more severe, particularly in the Caribbean as the climate warms. Mr. Fontanes, can LUMA terminate the agreement in an extended force major event? And if so, wouldn't an extended force major event such as after a hurricane be a time when grid work would be most needed?
Thank you for your question. I think what you may be referring to is the standard force majeure clause in the contract. I think, as in a typical contract, there are force majeure provisions to account for delays in services or operation, but that is definitely not intended to address the response for a hurricane. It's actually, this is what the LUMA team excels at. These are the companies that are called in to work in disasters, not only in the United States, but all over the globe. They attended disasters in California after the fires. They have attended hurricanes in Texas and in Florida. They have attended the wildfires in Australia. This is really one of their major strengths. I think one of the things that they are doing now during the transition period is working together with PREPA so that even though they have not commenced operations officially and are still in transition, they can assist PREPA in the event that we get struck by a hurricane during this season. I think that is definitely a misconstruction of a typical contract clause that is included in the P3 contract, but it's definitely not meant to be used as an excuse not to respond to the hurricane. That is actually what they're here to do as part of being the T&D operators. They're emergency responders, and they're going to be out there. They're already working on plans to help PREPA, and that is what they do. That is one of the criteria that we selected them upon, and I think if you look at the Partnership Committee report that's available on our website, you can see what they propose, their plans, and what they intend to do once they're here.
Thank you. I had a question, Mr. Chair, on decarbonization of Ms. Santiago, but I've run out of time, but I'll get that to the committee.
So
I yield back.
thank you, sir.
Okay.
My turn is up on the sequence. Ms. Howland, I don't know, I think we're in the same group. Somebody would, available for the chair? If not, then I'm going to call a recess and we'll return on the completion of at least the first vote or the second vote. So with that, we'll recess until the votes are done, and I apologize to the witnesses. Thank you. God damn.
Velasquez for questions for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this important hearing. My first question will be addressed to Mr. Ortiz. Mr. Ortiz, I have introduced legislation entitled the Puerto Rico Recovery Accuracy in Disclosures Act, which requires all consultants and advisors to PROMESA to publicly disclose their relationships and conflicts in order to increase transparency. In fact, I have documents in my power that demonstrate that consultants to the board are also consultants to SoftBank, which also has an interest in New Fortress Energy. Moreover, SoftBank also happens to be a client of the consulting group McKinsey. Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit this document to the record. Mr. Ortiz, do you believe that this arrangement is appropriate between McKinsey, Fortress Energy, and SoftBank?
I cannot judge something I haven't seen really. You know, we have to check that very closely, knowing that we have been.
I ask you, sir, if you think that this arrangement is appropriate.
Transparency and all that.
Mr. Ortiz, would you please answer my question? Do you think this arrangement is appropriate?
Mute. Mr. Ortiz, you may be muted. Can you unmute, please, and answer the question?
Let me see. No, I'm
Mr. Ortiz?
no, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did.
So my question is, do you think that arrangement is appropriate?
My answer again, responsibly, is I don't know what arrangement you're talking about. I haven't seen that before. I cannot
So
give
you
an
haven't seen
opinion
the
on
documents
something
that were filed
I
in
haven't
court?
seen. I cannot give you an opinion on something I haven't seen. I'll be
So,
responsible for my
Mr.
side.
Chairman, I will ask that the documents were sent to Mr. Ortiz, and Mr. Ortiz answer the question in writing to the committee.
Perfect.
Okay. So the gentleman will provide an answer in writing. So granted.
Mr. Ortiz, did PREPA do any due diligence to ensure that consultants with access to the procurement documents did not have conflict of interest?
Yes, that's a normal procedure.
How could you, however, we have a relationship between McKinsey, Fortress, and SoftBank, and you're telling me that that doesn't impact the procurement process. I can tell you that I've been fighting to get my legislation passed, which passed the House. We're waiting for the Senate, that passed the committee. Because the people of Puerto Rico are cynical, they are tired of the lack of transparency when it comes to issues that are important, that are going to impact their lives. So we have to make sure that the public trusts the New Fortress Energy contract is beneficial for the people of Puerto Rico when there is a lack of transparency and a clear conflict of interest during the procurement process. Mr. Avilés, can you explain why the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau failed to submit the New Fortress Energy contract for review by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
We, the Energy Bureau, is the local regulator, and we don't have to submit to the FERC the contract.
So the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission didn't send a show cause document asking New Fortress why did the contract was not submitted for FERC approval. You are not aware of that?
Yes, we are aware that that FERC is right now evaluating why New Fortress didn't submit to them some document for the permitting. But PREP is a local regulator, and all we did was to comply with the applicable local law and regulation in the evaluation of the documents submitted by PREPA when they submit the contract.
Mr. Fontanes, with Luma Energy, oh, my time is up.
Yeah.
Well, there were some technology issues, and so some time was,
Okay, ask your final question, Representative.
yes. Mr. Fontanes, will Luma Energy will be required to assume the pension payments, cover pre-existing health conditions, and any other benefits that those PREPA employees it hires had?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for the question. Luma Energy is coming as an operator of the system. So they will assume the obligations that PREPA has as an operator of the system.
And what will happen? Yes,
Go ahead.
continue, please.
Well, under Act 120, all acquired rights that the employees have under PREPA are transferred to Luma once they move to Luma. So any acquired rights that they have under the law, under regulation, or under the collective bargaining agreement moves with them to Luma. If they choose to stay with the PREPA pension plan, then Luma has an obligation to fund the PREPA pension plan. If they choose to join the Luma pension plan, then they will be offered what the Luma pension plan offers to them once they join.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I
Okay,
yield back.
the gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes Representative Gosar for 5 minutes, please.
I thank the chairman. I yield my time to Ms. Cologne.
Okay. Gentlelady's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Gozer, for yielding. One of the questions is going to be now to Mr. Jose Ortiz again, and is regarding the process for contract and RFP on PREPA. In terms of the contracts that are being discussed here today, did the Financial Oversight Board Management and the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau review the RFP process?
Yes, Congresswoman, not only the PREP and the Fiscal Oversight Board, but also in many cases the Title III for the Ecoelectrica contract, and also court, the Court of Appeals, and the administrative judge as well. So it has been reviewed for all possible entities or bodies to rule over them.
So the contract that we're talking about was challenged in the courts. It was challenged by who?
It was challenged by Puma, which was the second bidder. It went to the administrative judge. It didn't proceed. They went then to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeal granted to PREPA again their position. So it was done in a proper way. So this has been reviewed not only there, but also publicly, you know. And actually, at the end of the day, Puma came to our offices to say, we tried to do the best, but anyway, we failed this one. It will be next time. But to be honest, at the end of the day, we had the best of both worlds in that facility. Right now, you are able to burn natural gas, which is a lot cleaner. You make it comply with the EPA standards right now. And also, you have Puma as a supplier for diesel if needed. So you have the best of both worlds in terms of reliability and resiliency, in terms of a shortage of any of those fuels.
Question will be now in terms of the FERC. There's many talks and letters from members of this committee regarding FERC and a requirement to show costs of why it was not approved or requested that approval. What is the due diligence for PREPA of making the new contract? You need to have a FERC authorization, and in that sense, what were the processes you made with FERC regarding the new contract?
Yes, well, in 2018 and in 2019, we met with the FERC officials, and basically they made the representation to us, to PREPA, to our board members as well, which visited the FERC officials, that this is a small project that will not basically be under jurisdiction of FERC. The same representation was made to New Fortress Energy, and the same representation was made to the Coast Guard as well. So all those meetings were very consistent in that no jurisdiction was needed here. Let me tell you, and these discussions have been back to 2012 when I was the chairman of the board. At that time, I met with John Wellinghoff, the FERC executive director at that time in 2012. And he came to Puerto Rico, and we met and we talked about the project. I was not at any point discuss anything about jurisdiction. He just said, I remember at that time, he said, you just have to check the buffer zone, to preserve, for any potential problem or whatever. But that's it. That's all you have to take care of. So this is a project that has been discussed around for more than 8 years with different administrations in FERC. And up to this point, it was good. The representation that no FERC permit was needed, as it was presented to me and to my board, and it is good today as well. If you foresee all the different awards that FERC has been granted without any jurisdiction, basically. One example from the island, I can tell you, is Costa Sur. In Costa Sur, we have over a mile pipeline connected to Ecoelectrica. FERC didn't require any, taking any jurisdiction there. We're talking a mile pipeline. Here, we're talking about 75-foot pipeline, very close to the dock. So it doesn't make sense. If one was not needed, the other even less. So it makes a perfect sense, the representation from FERC officials at that time with what's being discussed today.
Thank you. Chairman.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes Representative Saban for 5 minutes, please, of questioning.
Mr. Chairman, did you just call me out?
Yes, I did, sir, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Okay, does anyone need time? I really have no question.
We have Mr. Soto here who might take 5 minutes for questioning. Do you prefer?
Sure, thank you. I thank the
chair recognizes the gentleman for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from the Northern Mariana Islands for that courtesy. Even during these difficult times, we have a tremendous opportunity to bring Puerto Rico's energy industry into the 21st century. And I want to reiterate some guiding principles that are important for the committee. One, we need power to be resilient and reliable. Two, we need it to be affordable. And three, we need to make every effort to boost renewable energy where feasible. I first want to talk a little bit about resiliency and reliability. Hurricane Maria exposed the vulnerable state of Puerto Rico's energy system. We took the rare step of amending the Stafford Act for Puerto Rico to be able to rebuild the grid better. Hurricane Dorian reminded us how precarious a position Puerto Rico still is in. It's not a question of if another hurricane will hit, but when. That's why it's critical that we use federal disaster relief funds to focus in part on rebuilding a more resilient and reliable system that can withstand another Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane. We also need it to be affordable. Puerto Rico is in an over decade-long recession, was hit by Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma, is facing terrible budget cuts by a PROMESA fiscal board, endured a wave of earthquakes, and now faces a coronavirus pandemic. The people of Puerto Rico must have affordable energy in order to survive, to thrive, and to bring the island back to prosperity. And finally, we need to adopt more renewable and cleaner fuels. Right now, we see 40% petroleum, 39% natural gas, 18% coal, and 2.3% renewables. First and foremost, it's clear that petroleum and coal are dirty and expensive and have to go as soon as possible. Puerto Rico law now requires the visionary standard of 100% renewable energy by 2050. These federal funds can also and should also be used to meet this renewable goal. We must start by boosting individual rooftop solar and battery systems, particularly in La Cordillera Central, like what the committee saw in Toro Negro during our trip, as well as other rural and low population areas. We also must convert other power generation to a combination of both renewable and natural gas. My question to several of you, and I'll call on you individually, is can Puerto Rico get rid of oil and coal by 2030? And if so, what is an achievable mix of renewables and natural gas that we could achieve by 2030 and why? I'm going to start with you, Mr. Ortiz.
Yes, well, the renewable technology is getting better and better by year by year. I doubt we can go, for example, 100% renewable by 2030.
But that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if we could get rid of oil and coal and convert to both renewables and natural gas by 2030.
Yes. No, absolutely.
Okay.
That's an absolute yes. We're moving to natural gas to replace all the liquid oils. Absolutely.
And Ms. Santiago, do you think we could get rid of oil and coal by 2030? And if so, what achievable mix can we get between renewables and natural gas by 2030? You're on mute.
Oops, okay. Yeah, so I think that we heard expert after expert at the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau hearings in this past February, talking about the steps that we need to really transform the Puerto Rico electric grid. Those steps start with energy efficiency programs, energy demand response programs, and certainly, yes, rooftop solar, renewables, coupled with battery energy storage systems, and other alternatives to centralized stations with fossil fuels.
My time's expired.
We can absolutely.
The gentleman has 30 seconds more
Oh.
because of
Please continue.
the delay in the clock.
Right. Okay, so we can absolutely make huge gains starting with those programs. And I expect that we can eliminate the burning of fossil fuels very rapidly. I would not say definitely in 2030, but certainly what we saw, what the experts said, everyone, and even the Siemens industry, which is the PREPA contractor, agreed that renewables with the complementary battery energy storage systems and other programs that I mentioned can do the job even as to the critical facilities like hospitals.
Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Representative Graves for 5 minutes, please, for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
have a quick question for Mr. Ortiz. First of all, I do want to follow up the questions that the gentlewoman from Puerto Rico brought up about the extraordinary investment. I too am interested in learning more about the billions of dollars that have been invested and have been borrowed by PREPA for investment into the energy system there. Yet the system still lacks performance. But I had another question. I know that a number of utilities went to Puerto Rico to provide assistance in restoring the system. And I know that a number of those utilities have provided invoices or billing to PREPA. And I know that FEMA has actually provided the reimbursement to PREPA for that work that was done by the utilities. However, the utilities in many cases have not been reimbursed or only been reimbursed a fraction of what was owed to them. Mr. Ortiz, could you explain sort of the disposition of those reimbursements and when PREPA plans on fulfilling their financial commitments that FEMA has already provided to them?
Actually, yes, you're absolutely right. We had some struggles at the beginning paying those companies. It was resolved already, finally. PREPA took like a year and a half in designing cost codes to be able to pay them, to reimburse them. That was resolved already. I hope in the next couple of months everybody will be paid. So
your estimate, I just want to make sure I heard you. Your estimate is in the next couple of months, you think that everyone could be paid?
Everything should be solved, yes.
Okay, all right. Mr. Chairman, I yield my remaining time to Ms. Gonzalez.
The remaining time is
Thank you.
spent to the gentlelady from Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Graves, for yielding and actually for visiting the island after Hurricane Maria and Irma and helping us out. My question will be in the same, before the time expired, I was asking Mr. Ortiz about the FERC diligence prior selecting the contract. And after your answer, my next question should be, if you have moved forward with the connection of the new company, if FERC tell you at that time that you needed any other provision or submit an application or have an authorization, you have been moving forward even having that, or you will stop that kind of a contract?
Well, certainly if the contract, the permitting belongs to the contractor. So that's their responsibility. I'll have to keep burning diesel, which is much more expensive. It's much more damage to the environment until they get the permit. So we're not going to be penalized. The people of Puerto Rico will be penalized, basically. But that's what's going to happen. It's their responsibility to get the contract. To get the permit.
A question. There was any other federal regulator that were concerned or express any reservation about that San Juan Harbor project before or during the process it was developed or built at a time?
No. The answer is no. The other one that is basically in a co-responsibility there is the Coast Guard. And they met with FERC and they argued that they were represented that no FERC jurisdictional permit is necessary. So that's why I don't understand their last moment request.
Question, do that new contract include provision for use or play provisions that you must use in PREPA?
No, we don't have any take or pay clause. We will be paying for whatever we use. If at some point diesel becomes cheaper, we can turn to diesel. But at the end of the day, we need to comply with EPA emissions. So it's very important, not only for the price purposes, but to comply with the non-attainment zone in EPA for many years in the area of San Juan to get natural gas there.
Question, what will be the net saving for the government and for the people of Puerto Rico just for giving this kind of transition or conversion?
Well, we can talk about 1 cent per kilowatt hour, but that translates basically in a family that consumes $150 a month, they'll be paying like $12 less about that. But that's for the common people.
Okay, can you repeat the number again?
If a family consumes $150, I'm talking about dollars now, that family will be paying $138 rather than $150 using the natural gas.
Thank you. My time expires, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Allen.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes Mr. Lowenthal for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And first, I want to apologize for running back and forth. I know other members have done this also, running back and forth and voting, and especially one who's voting remotely. It's getting to be quite a little trying to stay on top of both the hearing and what's going on the floor. And my question then may have been already asked to some extent, but I'm going to go back and, if it's worth saying it once, it's worth saying it more than once. And this is for Mr. Ortiz at the Electric Power Authority. The workers are really critical to the utilities success. But, their ability to excel has been limited somewhat by these outdated procedures that are not really consistent with industry best practices at this moment. So the question that I have is a few of them. How will LUMA actually improve working conditions? Have they had experience working with unions in some of the, their consortium and some of their other operations? And how will that LUMA contract have on the union, and will the existing union, the electrical industry and irrigation workers union, and does LUMA support unionization? Do they allow for unionization?
Yes, part of LUMA is Quanta. Quanta is the biggest, basically, utility company with the biggest number of unionized workers. So they know how to work with unions. And the benefit, I'll say, and this is what I've noticed so far, is that they devote a lot of time on training of the people, mostly on the safety issues. And secondary, since they have workers worldwide, basically, they can provide a lot of best practices, not only from the mainland, but also from the world to our employees. PREPA is a very difficult terrain. It's a tropical environment as well. So it has all the challenges. But let me tell you, the people of Puerto Rico is excellent. I think some additional training with all these new potential ways of seeing the things that are happening somewhere else, good practices, will be a plus for all these employees.
I have another question, though, and thank you for that, about the pension system. My understanding is it's woefully underfunded, and I'd like to know just how underfunded is it, and what are you going to do to ensure pensions? Will now PREPA make or LUMA make greater contributions? And will that add to the cost of electricity? How do you propose dealing with this shortfall in the pension system?
Yes, good question. The shortfall, let me tell you, the fund needs $5.5 billion. They have assets for $1.2 billion. So they are in the hole $4.3 billion. Bringing LUMA will stop the bleeding, basically. And we can cut from there, and the LUMA worker can decide to keep putting putting their monies in the pension plan. So we're trying to stop the bleeding here. Now PREPA has to deal with the $4.3 billion, and certainly it will have to be a PREPA's responsibility to find that money. Obviously the retirees cannot have the way to do it. We're looking for ways to reduce the tariff so that we can plug in some money to support the pension fund. There's no other way unless there is a tax, something in the tax system of Puerto Rico to provide money to that pension fund. But certainly, the pension fund is in a very difficult situation. Luma, basically what they make is not fixing it. They're just stopping the bleeding so that we can deal with what is in arrears, the $4.3 billion. So that's the way I foresee this.
I have just a little bit of time left, and I chair the subcommittee on natural resource on energy and mineral resources, and we've held a number of hearings in the North Atlantic on offshore wind. Has there been any attempts to begin to deal with offshore wind as an alternative for renewable energy?
No, it hasn't, but certainly I visited the wind farm close to, it's at the north of Montauk. You have a very nice wind farm there, and I know New York is trying to do something bigger offshore.
And
They're talking about,
Massachusetts? And
yes, and
Massachusetts
they're
is
talking
doing
about
it?
and they're talking about around 9 cents per kilowatt hour, which is very competitive for Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico in the south is very shallow and it's very windy. So I foresee something being explored in the near future. But those are the conditions I discussed already with the New York Power Authority and with the Long Island Power Authority.
Well, thank you for that, and I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lowenthal. The chair recognizes Mrs. Radewagen for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I want to thank the chairman and ranking member for holding this hearing. I welcome the panel. At this time, I yield all of my time to Congresswoman Gonzalez Colon. Thank you. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, my friend Amada Radewagen. I know you are in American Samoa this time, so thank you for yielding. And I will just take my turn this time to enforce what Representative Lowenthal just mentioned about the opportunities in offshore energy. And in that sense, I just want to highlight bipartisan legislation I introduced that could help Puerto Rico's energy transformation. And in that sense, it was passed during the last Congress. Again, it was recommended by this committee unanimously. All territories are original co-sponsors of this bill, again, in a bipartisan way. And I'm referring to H.R. 1014, the Offshore Wind for Territories Act. The bill will amend federal law to study the potential for and authorize offshore wind energy development in the exclusive economic zone adjacent to the 5 U.S. territories. I mean, you may have that in the eastern part of the United States, but territories are not authorized by Congress. So in that sense, it could establish a dedicated fund for coral reef conservation and a direct portion of this of the offshore wind revenues back into the local communities. Again, this committee reported this unanimously last year, and an identical bill was passed under suspension. So we are, if enacted, this bill will create not just jobs, address energy needs and the prices in the territories, and for me, very important, and our reliance on imported foreign petroleum products, while boosting revenue sources and helping protect our coral reef. So in that sense, that's something that will promote the study of it. It's not that we're going to be doing it, although we visited the windmills in the south part of the island recently with the delegation of the Department of Energy. Now I'm going back to Mr. Ortiz. There are several issues that are being part of the questionings today regarding not just the private contracts, but whether the PREPA is in a good position to face new developments in the south, like the earthquakes or the hurricanes. And in that sense, I was asking prior to this turn the situation with the FERC. My question will be, let's assume, and this is a bad omen, but anyway, what should be the impact for PREPA and for the people of Puerto Rico? It's FERC order this facility to shut down. What's going to be the immediate impact for PREPA?
Well, immediately, Congresswoman, we will have to rely more on the South generation. The same area that is being shaking for the past 6 months, we will be passing all the responsibility to provide energy to the 70% of the Puerto Ricans from the South, basically, because the main plant is San Juan, and we are not allowed to use diesel 100% because that provides limitations from the EPA due to the emissions with diesel. So we will have to go back to provide energy to the north from the south, and that was the biggest problem of Maria. When we lost the transmission from the south to north, we lost basically power for like 70% of the population for close to 5 months until we restore basically the central area of the island. So we will be in a weaker position. We will be using in a limited way San Juan 5 and 6, and we will be limiting the reliability of the system very seriously.
And that means that if we need to go back to Costa Sur in the south part of the island, that we will not have neither 500 or 800 megawatts that are needed in reserve to manage the capacity of the demand of electricity on the island. Am I right?
You're correct.
And at this time, how much megawatts we still have in reserve to meet the demands of the energy on the island?
Right now, we are in 3,200 megawatts. The demand is close to 2,800. Basically, in average, we're around those numbers.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez Colon. The chair recognizes Mr. Cox for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for our witnesses for being here today. My question has more to do with kind of some of the previous disasters that have unfortunately befallen Puerto Rico. And as Ms. Gonzalez Colon noted earlier, and Mr. Tonko as well, we're right upon a new hurricane season. And there's certainly going to be future natural disasters. And my question really for Mr. Ortiz, if you'll indulge me, is that there's quite a bit of concern about the FEMA payments or no payments that have been made to contractors who stepped in during the aftermath of Hurricanes Irma and Maria. And I'd really like to know is what has PREPA and the agency done with submitting and getting these contractors paid? And if they haven't, has FEMA shared with you any of the reasons that these contractors haven't been paid, why they're awaiting payments, and really what has PREPA done to submit and to advocate for these reimbursements?
Yes, most of the contractors that are still not paid or not fully paid are from the Edison Electrical Institute, the ones brought by that institution. That will be resolved in the next few days because what was missing was a cost code from FEMA in order to pay them. So it's something in their system that was resolved recently. We were basically fighting with that issue for a year and a half. That's resolved. And as I said to a previous congressman, it will be, I hope everybody will be paid in full within the next 2 months.
Oh, okay. Well, great. No, thank you so much. And if we could impress upon you about how necessary that is, and if need be, could you provide the committee with detailed information on these project worksheets so, and in fact, that we could follow up with FEMA if necessary?
Lovely.
Thank you so much. And certainly, the question to go out to both you, Mr. Ortiz and Mr. Rossi, is that have you seen or can you imagine any lack of willingness for other contractors to conduct emergency response work when future natural disasters impact the island because of the situation that we found ourselves in subsequent to Hurricanes Irma and Maria? If contractors aren't going to get paid, they're certainly going to be less likely to be able to step up when they're needed.
That's a very important point, and let me tell you, we get communication with them. They know what we are waiting for, and they know we have moved forward with their payments and all that. I foresee a good relationship with them, keeping the good bounds. And let me tell you, we actually participated in the mutual aid training for all facilities or all utilities back in October in New York, and our team was there with the other teams. So we keep a good communication, and I foresee all of them willing, to come and help Puerto Rico if needed. And the same way in the other direction.
Well, thanks so much, Mr. Ortiz. And I don't know if Mr. Rossi would like to chime in as well.
I would think that PREPA would find a way to convince contractors to come in. I think the general problem we have is not just with contractors in emergency, it's in general just a lack of trust and confidence in PREPA's ability to execute makes everything more costly for PREPA and thus for consumers. I think that's what my statement had to do with. We need a world-class regulation along with world-class LUMA and world-class investment in renewable energy markets. That means something to homes and I think that's the biggest challenge we face. It's just a Puerto Rico risk, the PREPA risk would be very costly if we don't do something where congressional oversight, PREP, CDBRG come together to fix that Puerto Rico risk that won't be fixed for many years. And that's my greatest concern.
Great, thank you so much. And the committee certainly stands ready, willing, and able to help you in any way possible. And I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. And the chair I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. And I'll start with Mr. Ortiz and Mr. Aviles. Why is PREPA a binding public funds and long-term natural gas project, which is not a renewable energy source, when the integrated resource plan has not been approved by the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, and Act 17/2019 requires the integration of 100% renewables by 2050?
If I may start, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Well, let me tell you, while we grow in the renewables, and we're growing very fast, really, nothing has been done in the past many years. And today we have 18,000 homeowners with detached solar rooftop solar, good for 200 megawatts, so that you know. But the perfect partner in this dance of growing into renewables is a stable, cheap system with batteries. As I said before, we have 3 projects of batteries, battery farms in the east of Puerto Rico and 2 in the north, in the metropolitan area, good for 180 megawatts. But the thing here is that you cannot grow responsibly on renewables unless you have a very stable system that would catch up all the voids inherent to the renewable generation today. If you look at the graph of the consumption in Puerto Rico, it has peaks. And once you reach the 8:30, 9 p.m. every night, you have a big drop of renewables because you exhausted your batteries at that point. So you need something to catch up. And if you're talking about bringing industrials, manufacturing to the island, certainly you need a stabilization of the voltage. So the short-term projects we have with natural gas, but let me remind you that the natural gas, for example, in San Juan is a 5-year project that you can extend in periods of 5 years, all depending on the need of injection of additional power due to the condition of the system. All depends on how fast and how good the renewables behave. But certainly you need to fill the voids of the variability of the renewables in the system. And that's why the natural gas is so important.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Let me ask Mr. Is Mr. Aviles still with us? Mr. Aviles, did you want to respond in some way?
Yes, I would like to add that in order to achieve the renewable goals established in Act 17, we need some kind of transition fuel. And I can say that gas at this moment is much better than the existing old and inefficiency petroleum gas. So that's why in some point we have to invest in gas in order to achieve the renewable goals clearly established in Act 17. That's the answer.
Thank you so much. I don't have a whole lot of time left, but let me go, and both gentlemen, if you can answer jointly again. The federal coordinator for the reconstruction of Puerto Rico, Peter Brown, recently expressed that nuclear energy is an option to diversify Puerto Rico's energy sources. PREPA's integrated resources plan does not integrate nuclear energy as an option. Will PREPA maintain this position in compliance with Act 17/2019, which requires reaching a minimum of 40% renewable energy integration by 2025, 60% by 2040, and 100 by 2050?
But if I may, about the nuclear generation, it's not a technical problem. It's really a public policy problem. I don't foresee any community in the world saying that they are for the nuclear power. We could have the most advanced technology, very safe and all that. But with the myriad of events happening in the past 40 years in the world, I don't foresee that being pushed by any public official. You can certainly say that this is technically adequate, but it's very tough to sell to any community.
Thank you. Mr. Aviles, I'm over time now. Do you have anything to add just for a few seconds?
Just like Mr. Ortiz already said, this is not a technical issue. This is a policy issue. So right now, Act 17 clearly states what the goals are, and nuclear energy is not there. But if our legislature decide otherwise, we PREP have to follow. That's what I have to say about that.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your time. I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing. Under Committee Rule 3.0, members of the committee must submit witness questions within 3 business days following this hearing, and the hearing record will be open for 10 business days for these responses. If there is no further business.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just to add something, Ms. Velasquez made a question to Mr. Ortiz referring to a document that was submitted for the record. I'm just asking the committee to submit that document to Mr. Ortiz as well as the ranking member so we can examine the documents because there were no direct reference of what they were.
Without objection. Without objection, so ordered. This committee stands adjourned.